We'll have three wonderful speakers today. First of all, will be Florian Schur. Then we'll have Maytal Landau and finally Rebecca Thompson. So let me give you a brief bio for all three. Starting with Florian, he studied, excuse me. There we go. He studied molecular biology at the University of Vienna, and that was followed by his PhD at EMBL Heidelberg, which was done under the supervision of John Briggs. He then carried out a postdoc still at EMBL and later joined ISTA, so the Institute of Science and Technology in Austria, as an assistant professor, where his group studies structural biology of cell migration and viral infection. And for the purpose of today's webinar, he's a recipient of an ERC starting grant. Afterwards, we'll have Maytal Landau, who studied pharmacy at the Hebrew University, followed by a PhD at Tel Aviv University. After that, she moved to Los Angeles to do a postdoc at the University of California, and later started her own independent lab as an associate professor in 2012, and that was at the Technion, which is the Israel Institute of Technology. Since then, she's become a visitor group leader at EMBL Hamburg since 2020, and starting in April this year, she's become a professor affiliated with DESI, the synchrotron in Hamburg, as well as the Hamburg Eppendorf University Clinic. She'll be heading a group located at the CSSB, which is the Center for Structural Systems Biology in Hamburg. And again, for the purpose of today's webinar, she is a recipient of the ERC Consolidator Grant. Last but not least, of course, we have Rebecca Thompson. She's Sales Development Director at Thermo Fisher. And Rebecca and her team, which I'm lucky to be a part of, we essentially support researchers across Europe, Middle East, and Africa to adopt different EM techniques and also to make the most out of EM in their research. Before she joined Thermo Fisher, she was head of research facilities for the Faculty of Biological Sciences and deputy director of the electron microscopy facility at the Astonbury Biostructure Laboratory at the University of Leeds. At this point, she has over 12 years of experience in EM and cryo-EM, both in single particle and tomography, in all kinds of proteins, from membrane proteins to soluble complexes and adenoid fibrils. And she was also involved in some cryo-EM method development. During that time, or 7 of those years, she was part of core facility labs, and this has very much made her dedicated to reducing barriers to accessing technology, particularly focusing on training and streamlining workflows. And of course, she has experience in securing funding for electron microscopy systems. This is how we'll structure the webinar today. First, I'll start with a quick introduction to ERC grants, and that will be followed by the success stories from ERC awardees. So that will be Florian and Maytal. Later, we'll hear from Rebecca on how electron microscopy can be part of ERC grants, and then we'll finish with an interactive panel discussion where we'll answer your questions. So introducing ERC grants, essentially one of the few barriers to application is that research has to be carried out in an organization that is a EU member state or an associated country. The list of associated countries is somewhat extensive, but they have a list on their website. There are several grants. First, the ERC starting grant, and this is dedicated towards early career researchers, meaning anything from 2 to 7 years post-PhD. And they are awarded 1.5 million euros to be used over a period of 5 years. The step after that is the ERC Consolidator Grant. This is more for established researchers, meaning 7 to 12 years after PhD, and they are awarded 2 million for a period of 5 years. And lastly, the ERC Advanced Grant. And this is the last stage. This is for active researchers with a track record and achieving significant research output over the last 10 years, and the award there is 2.5 million. I've also put the total amount available in a gray circle on the top right for each one. And this is available not just for life sciences, for everyone. Life sciences takes up about a third of that. There are another 2 types of grants. These are the ERC Proof of Concept and the ERC Synergy grants. The Proof of Concept are there to basically expand on a research concept that has arisen during the course of a project that was already funded through another ERC grant. And lastly, the Synergy grants are for large collaborative projects, but I won't touch on those anymore. Instead, we will focus on these 3 types of ERC grants. The cadence for all 3 is yearly. They all have different deadlines. two of which are open. So for the starting grants, the deadline is the 7th of November, so it's coming up very soon. For the consolidator grant, it's the 12th of December. The ERC advanced grant will open up again in May of next year, and the deadline will be at the very end of August. For all three, the evaluation process is fairly extensive, meaning it takes a long time, so anywhere between 8 and 12 months. Something that is particularly important for the point of this webinar is that for all three, there is an option of applying for an additional 1 million euros in addition to the 1.5 to 2.5 that is available at base. And this is made available to cover, or can be made available to cover the purchase of major equipment and also to secure access to large facilities. So this is quite important for this. Going into the evaluation process, the main line is that scientific excellence is the sole criterion of evaluation. Of course, as I'm sure we all know by now, it's a little bit more complicated than that. The research has to be groundbreaking and also feasible, and this is emphasized multiple times as the feasibility. It's not only the project that's being assessed, but also the PI in charge of the project. So the intellectual capacity, creativity, commitment, and scientific expertise is also evaluated as part of the ERC. The grants have three parts. Part A, which is essentially administrative, it has an abstract, it has the keywords. Part B1, which is like a short version of the grant, which has a synopsis, CV, track record, and this is all that's evaluated in the initial steps of evaluation. And lastly, part B2, which is the more extended description, has detailed timelines, detailed budget, and so on. The process is normally categorized in 7 steps, but I've reduced it to 3 for the sake of the webinar. First of all, part A is used to assign the proposal to different panel members, and that's done to have a good match between the expertise of the panel and the content of the grant. After that, part B1 only is evaluated, and the panel decides which proposals are invited for interviews, and they're given a score A, B, or C, of which only A proceeds to the next step. And this is quite crucial because if you're scored B or C, this has an impact on when you can apply again. The last step is a step where remote reviewers are selected, and panel members and reviewers evaluate parts B1 and B2, and interviews take place. And these are then scored A or B. So score A is where the proposal is good enough that if the budget was unlimited, they would get funding. But of course, the budget is not unlimited, meaning that only the very top of the grants that are scored A eventually receive funding. Statistically, it's actually not that bad. So the success rate for ERC grants, and this is for all starting, consolidator, and advanced, is around 14%. Okay, so now we can move on to our success stories from ERC awardees, first with Florian. So if you want to start, Florian.
Sure. You can hear me now?
Yes.
Great. So I take control of the presentation. Should hopefully work now. Yes. Okay. Great. So yeah, first of all, thanks for having me, and also thanks to everyone who joined to listen to, I'm not sure if you should call it a success story. It's more like a subjective story of how I eventually managed to obtain an ERC grant. So you already a little introduction. So I'm Florian Schur. I'm a group leader at the Institute of Science and Technology, Austria, and I will quickly explain how I eventually obtained an ERC starting grant in the 2022 call for a project that's called ActinID. That was the acronym. And you can see here the full title, but I won't bore you with the biological details. I think, one of the things to take away already from the beginning, I think a good acronym is actually quite important for the entire proposal, because if it sticks, it actually already, gives you a bit of an advantage. So, okay. It should give me a second. Yeah, there we go. So before I actually tell you how, the timeline of writing and then, submitting the grant, I want to just my my CV and what I did until the point of applying for the grant. So as it was mentioned, I did my PhD at EMBL Heidelberg, and there I finished in 2016. And then very shortly after already started my tenure track position at ISTA. And this meant actually that I had the full 5 years available for applying for an ERC starting grant. And actually that was quite a comfortable situation to be in, because it gave me a little bit of confidence that I could apply more than once to an ERC starting grant, and that I did not only have one shot at it. And that's why I say this is a very subjective view of how everything worked out, and can be different for everybody. In 2020, so a couple of years ago, I also was appointed the scientific head of the electron microscopy facility at ISTA, because in our research, we really heavily rely on electron microscopy, specifically on cryo-electron tomography and cryo-electron microscopy. And there we also established essentially the entire pipeline at our institute. And that was very important to essentially create an environment which is key for a successful ERC application as well, in order to do all the things that you propose that you're going to work on. And here, we had essentially all the equipment from screening microscopes to high-end microscopes. And these are the research topics. And what's also important to mention for me, it was that when I applied eventually successfully to the ERC grant, I had already quite a large group. This is what, the group that I had in 2022 when I applied, which already, means that I had a couple of years to get actually established and already, obtain preliminary data, which helped me writing the grant. But it's not absolutely necessary to have preliminary data for a strong ERC starting grant, because there, different things also are taken into consideration. So before then, I also obtained an ERC grant. I wrote, successfully and also not so successful grant applications to national and international funding agencies, such as the Austrian Science Fund or the John Zuckerberg Initiative. And that really was actually good practice, and is continuing to be good practice, to think about how to design a grant, to think about what are the aims, what are the research objectives, and to also then find out what is it that the individual grant agencies are looking for. For example, the John Zuckerberg Initiative or also the ERC are looking for really high risk, high gain proposals, while other, maybe national research agencies might be a little bit more risk averse, or more, they're looking for more established projects. So I did not actually apply only once to the ERC starting grant, but I actually applied twice. So in my first year that I could actually apply to it was in the 2019 starting grant call. I was unsuccessful. And I was unsuccessful that I scored B in the first round, as it was just explained before. So I was actually not, passed on to the second round, where then the part B was evaluated by external reviewers, and I was not invited to the interview. What it actually meant was that I was blocked from one application for one application round. So I could not apply in the ERC 2020 starting grant call. And there should be something coming up now. It's a bit slow in responding. So that meant, like I said, I was blocked for the ERC starting grant call in 2020, which was a bit of a, disappointment, obviously. But retrospectively, when I look at how I prepared for that ERC 2019 starting grant and how much time I invested into it, I can definitely see that it was too little preparation time that I invested into it. So approximately, I started preparing around 2 months before the deadline of submission, and that was too little, because it didn't give me enough time to really think about the concepts of my ideas, about defining the work packages, and also getting actually feedback on my ideas. So this is probably then what really were the key points that I took from this first unsuccessful application, was that if one applies for the ERC starting grant, one really has to take the time and to think about all the details. So really to be sure that every step that you are proposing actually is very sound, and that you ask for advice, that you look either into resources that are available online from the ERC, or also like into these webinars, but also you get honest feedback on your ideas from colleagues, which are maybe also generalists and not really specifically experienced in your field, so they can tell you what actually makes sense and what doesn't make sense. So I was obviously blocked for 2022, so I could have applied in 2021 then, but then because of COVID and also other reasons, I said, actually, I want to wait one more year. And this was, the very, comfortable situation I was in because of having these numbers of tries to only apply in the ERC 2022 starting grant call. And here I then really started to think about the entire, grant very, very early on. So the ERC deadline for this call was in January 2022. And I started to actually think about the initial concept and, started the planning of writing already in January 2021. So I really took 1 year to, to refine the grant completely. And I will now talk about the different steps throughout this process. So when I started the initial conceptualization and the grant writing, I first actually took a step back and I thought, what is the ERC grant about? What do they look for? What are the specific requirements? And also, what kind of resources are available? Like I mentioned before, looking into these videos that the ERC provides actually in telling you what kind of things they're looking for, they are quite useful. Also, there it really became apparent to me that the environment is also very key, so that you have to really make sure in your grant that you detail why you're working in an environment where you can be successful, and that you think about the panel that you aim for, because you have different panels. And in the first application that I did, I probably applied to the wrong panel. And that's also one of the reasons why I probably did not make it to the other round. When I then conceptualized, my idea, this is the idea essentially of what I wanted to do. I really took a quite old-fashioned approach. I sat down and wrote out every idea and objective that I had on an A3 piece of paper, and I spent several weeks on writing by hand all the ideas that I have, the work packages that I have to achieve in order to, to achieve the aim that I propose, and what kind of deliverables and milestones I have to, then eventually when I had finished this handwriting step, I could just write them down into a Word document in a quite fast fashion. I then, after several months of refining these ideas, I did the first internal presentation of the concept. So I asked a lot of faculty members at our institute if I could actually present them my work. And we did this really in like a chalk talk style of presentation. And there I got very honest and critical feedback of things that do not make sense at all and things that actually would make sense and that I could elaborate more on. And then I used 2 more months actually to really refine these things further. So here, this was really like a crucial step for me to really get people to tell me exactly what they think, because I got very harsh critics also, which really made the thing better. Then writing the proposal over Christmas was nothing that I would recommend doing, especially when you have family. But unfortunately, this is how the deadline was set. And then I submitted, and then approximately 5 months later, I was notified that I make it to step 1, make it to step 2. I did not spend too much time thinking about it until June, July then, where I then started to ask around whether colleagues have time to listen to my presentation that I'm now going to prepare for the interview. I did an FFG interview training, which is a professional training provided by the Austrian Research Promotion Agency, where they can give you feedback of how your presentation is. You present it to other people that are applying to the ERC grant, and you really get very honest feedback. And that interview presentation was probably the most rehearsed presentation I've ever done in my life. I think I spent only 4 weeks on practicing this 10-minute presentation to make sure that I get the message across. I again presented it to colleagues in the institute, outside the institute, to be prepared then eventually for the ERC interview. And there you really have to be prepared for detailed questions where people ask you about budget. For me, they asked me about details about how am I going to spend money for publishing costs, how many papers will I publish, how do I recruit people, and so on and so forth. And finally, 1 month later, I was then notified about the outcome of step 2. And there I saw the first time the number of reviewers I had. So I had 13 external reviewers evaluating my proposal, which is actually quite a lot. And there I could really then see from these reviews what kind of questions the panel was actually asking. So the panel really prepared their questions based on the reviews they obtained. And they also had many general questions. So another advice I was given, and I also would give, is there are lists about the general questions that you always get during an interview. Get this list, prepare for these questions so that you're not surprised. And eventually then, when I was informed that I got the grant, this was I was quite happy. But I would still say that the entire process, given how long it takes, even if it would have been unsuccessful, really helped me actually to formulate my ideas extremely well. And I could have used these ideas and these improvements then for another application round. So this was just, a very subjective timeline of how I did things. I'm happy to take afterwards questions, but I probably will now hand on to Maital, because she will tell you also her, maybe also very subjective experience.
Okay.
Thanks. Should I have it control or should I leave it?
Yeah, there you go. All yours.
Okay. Okay, so missing. It's very slow. Did it jump one? Okay.
Yeah, there will be a little bit of a lag, but you can control it.
Yeah. Okay. So first of, I want to introduce myself. I have 2 labs in 2 continents. I started my lab at the Technion in Israel about 11 years ago, and I am still keeping the lab. I still have students and a postdoc and staff scientists there. And I just really recently opened a lab on the DESI premises at the CSSB building. And I'm affiliated with the UKE and EMBL, and with a very generous position that came from Helmholtz, and it was before I got the ERC. So the ERC was a really nice bonus to the starting of the lab, and it allows us to really grow. And so we are now in the stage that people are joining basically every day, and more people are expected to come. And so now I'm torn because I'm pretty heartbroken these days, and my lab in Israel is really suffering, and my friend of family, and so many other people. So it's a really tough days, and but science is still my pillar, and I'm holding on to that. So I want to tell you about at least our scientific journey. So jumping. Okay, so I had a lot of fun with ERC, and all of my application were to LS1, which I don't think it's an easy panel, but I never could find a more suiting panel, so I stayed with this one. And I started with starting grants at 2015. It's just after I started my position, and I got a B. And you even got your ranks at the time, so you know roughly where you are standing. And this B was no fun, because then I had to miss that 2016 year, and I applied again for the starting grant at 2017. I got the rank that I was pretty close. I was just above the proposal that were taking to the interview, but I was still far away because I still got a B. And I think in this case, as Florian says, it's really important to think about the timing, because, for example, with this grant, it was I applied 1 month before a big publication came out, and I think it was a very serious mistake. And I think I was pressured too much by my institute and by my environment to apply to the ERC. And in this case, because it was already a few years after my position, I should have waited another year because I had it. But since I got a B, I missed my starting grant option. So these things really have to be calculated, that not necessarily running to apply is good. I think it's good to write the grant, but then to decide at the end if you really want to submit it or to wait another year, because the writing grant themselves, they have a lot of advantages. And then I had to start with a consolidator grant 2 years later. and I was getting an interview for the first time. I was very happy about this, but I was not doing super well at the second stage, and I wasn't funded. But then I went again because I got an A year later. But basically, it's like you don't have a lot of time between the rejection and writing a new application. And then I got an interview again, and then I was super excited and spent a lot of time preparing for the interview. And I got a little bit better in the score, but still was not funded. But I was not discouraged. Well, I was sitting at home and crying for a very long time, to be honest, but still I woke up and wrote another grant. So I applied again for 2021, still not good enough, and I wasn't funded. So I cried again for a few days at home, and then I had a lot of chocolate and other reassuring things, and I wrote another grant, and I got an interview, and this time it was funded. And so it was a big celebration for me, and I was wondering what changed. So I think that, I don't know, really between the maybe last 2 or 3 applications, they were not that different from each other. Maybe I learned to focus a little bit. Maybe the part of the criticism is that I was too scattered. And I think with the time I was able to define my goals and my aim and to actually narrow down what I was planning to do. So the very, very high risk aspect I actually took out. So anything that was controversial in terms of some reviewers did not like, hypotheses that I saw that they were not very liked. Some reviewers loved them, but some reviewers hated them. So I was not happy about this, but I took them out. So controversial hypothesis out, more focus in. And also they want to know that you can carry out work. And in the last interview, I told them that I got this position in DESI. I don't know if this part made a difference, but it is possible that the relocation to Germany was crucial. I have no way of really knowing. And the funded project was related to a bit delay. Okay, I think I missed one. I'm too fast on the keyboard. Another one. Okay. So the funded project is related to amyloid fibrils that are actually related to infectious diseases, so either from the antimicrobial side or from the virulent side. And a huge proportion of the project is relying on high resolution information, and it's coming from cryo-EM and cryo-ET and cryo-CLEM. So this move to the CSSB, where we have these microscopes and they're super available, might be a critical part of the funding of the project, because this is a project that requires basically to have this microscope in your back door. And then it leads to the question, when you are writing your ERC application, if you really have the infrastructure do you need, or if you don't, if you have enough access. So if you do have regular access to the needed microscope, you have to make sure that you know what is expected. For example, service fees, even if you have it in your home, do you still need to pay quite a large sum of money? So you have to include this in your budget. If you want to think about upgrade to existing instruments and it's critical for your project, then you have to put this into the budget, and it also shows that you are willing to invest in your technology. And you really have to specify about personnel. So if you don't have the high experience personnel already in your lab, then a part of your application is that you will hire such people. And what happens if you don't have access to the needed microscopes? Then you can still indicate that you will look for external places to carry out your work. So you have to include the service fee as an external user. You can ask for some entry-level equipment that you buy in your for your like in-house, and you can initiate some experiments and form the grounds for using higher end microscopes. You can name several institutes as beneficiaries if you are affiliated with another institute that have this microscope. So you can ask them to assist you with this application. I, for example, named EMBO as a beneficiary. And you can say that you are successfully already sent application via INEX or Instruct or other programs to use microscope or other facilities in other places. You have to ask them for traveling expenses and still to hire this experience and training personnel. So they can ask you questions in the interview that are crazily specific, that are related to what you will do with the money for this and this thing. So you have to not disregard the non-scientific part of your proposal. It also can be, it's not as important probably, but you can still be asked on this aspect. So this is for me, and good luck to everyone who is applying, and you can write me an email with any questions.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. We're just changing the cameras, and hopefully I now have control of the slides. Let's see. Yep, there we go. Fantastic. So, hi everybody. Thank you very much for the introduction, and really just to extend my huge thanks to Maytal and Florian for joining us today and sharing their experiences. So just to wrap up, sorry, I'm just waiting for the slides. Here we go. Slides come up. So just to wrap up, we're aware that many of you on the call today are going to be actively considering developing your grant proposals, either for ERC grants or for other national funding programs. And the diversity of research projects, if we were to go through all of the attendees today, I'm sure is extraordinary. And this is one of the things that I really love about electron microscopy, and the reason that I fell in love with the technique is there is really no other technology in the life sciences that allows us to answer such a range of questions across a range of different samples and resolution scales. Of course, many of us on the call here today would probably self-identify as structural biologists, and we're all aware of the resolution revolution in cryo-electron microscopy, and we think 2024, this is going to be, this is the year that cryo-electron microscopy will become the predominant method for structure determination or high-resolution structure determination. Oh, so Daisy. Slide moved on a bit too quickly. So surpassing the use, for example, of the traditionally predominant techniques of X-ray crystallography and NMR. And of course, Thermo Fisher offers a portfolio of transmission electron microscopes, which have really, if we look at the EMDB entries, the Titan Cryos has been really the main tool that has been used globally to solve high resolution structures. And then recently we've had other additions to this portfolio, notably the Tundra. But let's not forget, towards the entry, not every site, not every institution has access to a Cryos or a Glacios. And there are many institutions for which having a Talos or a Tundra available, this then enables local access to electron microscopy, and then to be able to take the prepared grids, the screened grids, to other national facilities. So when we reflect back in terms of the hardware development, electron microscopes have come a long way in a very short space of time in terms of the results that they're able to drive. And I really love this slide, which is particularly focusing on the Glacios 2, but reflecting back on how long it was taking just for apoferritin, a test specimen. So if we go back to 2017, the kind of world record breaking results that we were able to get from a 200 kV system, whereas it was taking us about 30 hours of data collection to get to a 3.3 angstrom structure. If we fast forward that today with the Glacios 2 hardware improvements, including the new detectors, the Falcon 4, and also critically the software improvements, so smart EPU, multi-grid EPU, we're now seeing an improvement in data quality and also quantity. So now in 2022, we're able to get a better quality reconstruction, so 1.6 angstroms with just 7 hours of data. So transmission electron microscopy has really come a long way, and I think it's worth reflecting for the purpose of this call that it's not just the microscope and the column itself, it's also the software environment and the accessories, the detectors going around that can make a real difference to the results that can be driven. So while single particle cryo-electron microscopy has really been the technique causing lots of excitement in the last few years, we're seeing a huge growth in cryo-electron tomography. And if we look at the EMDB and the trends in the submission of structures solved by single particle techniques versus subtomogram averaging, and then we can see a similar kind of trend, and we maybe think that cryo-electron tomography is around 6 to 7 years behind, but is following a similar trajectory of huge growth that we saw from single particle. And I think one of the reasons that this is one of the most exciting frontiers in terms of our technology development is because our cryo-electron tomography workflows can be used to solve a whole variety of, let's have a look, if the slide is going to change. That's great, there we go. So cryo-electron tomography can be used to solve a whole variety or answer a whole variety of different biological questions, from looking at pleomorphic individual viruses, but most excitingly, progressing up and working and allowing us to solve structures in tissues, inside cells and inside tissue specimens themselves. Of course, if we were to take a lump of tissue and just directly shove this into a Titan Cryo microscope, the sample is going to be too thick, obviously, for us to image or get any high resolution data out. And we've had a significant develop in the dual beam systems recently. So just only a couple of months ago, Thermo Fisher has launched the HydraBio. So this is a cryoplasma fib, which allows, all of these systems allow us to prepare, depending on the workflows, cells and tissues for imaging, high resolution imaging in our transmission electron microscope. And then last but not least, we often focus in the life sciences and particularly in the research communities that I often engage with on transmission electron microscopy, but especially when we're thinking around what equipment you might be looking to bring into a laboratory under, for example, for the ERC grants, the €1 million additional limit for equipment, then some of the SEM systems that are available are highly capable of being able to drive results, again, depending on the research question and depending on the sample. So this is a real whistle-stop tour through, but Thermo Fisher offers a whole variety of different electron microscopy technologies capable of answering a variety of questions in the life sciences. So, and all of you, I'm sure, on the call will already have a strong vision or be starting to develop a vision in terms of your research and what you want the proposal to look like. And what we really wanted to highlight here today was the ways that we can help you as you're looking to go through this grant application process. So every research proposal that is developed, is unique, and every institution that you might be looking to host that grant will also be unique in terms of the hardware they have available, the wider research environment. So understanding that and then thinking about what additional systems are in place, what additional systems you might want to bring in order to enable your research program. And that's something, if you reach out, then we can talk to you about the latest portfolio of essentially of microscopes, but also ways in which we might be able to upgrade existing systems to enable you to conduct your research programs on the systems available for you. Of course, when we're looking at bringing new instrumentation into a research environment, into a university, for example, there may be existing space for that, or there may be that there are some renovations required. Maybe you think there's a room available, but you're not necessarily sure if it's suitable. That's something where we can help. So please do reach out. And honestly, on this one, the earlier the better. And we'd be very happy to support and guide you as you're working through that process. The next step I really wanted to highlight, certainly when I've been going through processes and writing grant applications, one of the major things which can sometimes be quite challenging to get is preliminary data to be able to support that grant application. So we may be able to provide opportunities for you to either come and try out a system or potentially even collect data on your samples, which you would then be able to use in your grant application. And we'd be very happy to talk that through. In terms of the grant application itself, sometimes there are tricky questions that are asked through that process, for example, around data management or environmental sustainability. And this is something where if you get in touch, we may be able to provide some specific information to help you write those tricky sections. So for any of these points, or if there are any other requests as you go through, you're very welcome to get in touch with our expert teams, and you can do that either through your account manager. If you don't know who your local account manager is, which honestly many people, especially when they're starting out in your careers, may not know who that individual is, you can get in touch with us directly through the funding website, which hopefully we'll move to the next slide. If not, Itzia, would you mind moving me on? That's great. So you can get in touch via the funding webpage. There's a QR code here as well, and you can submit a request. Or finally, please feel free also to directly reach out to myself, and I'd be very, very happy to direct you to the right location. Okay, so with that, I'm going to shut up and hand back over to Itzia, and we'll take some questions.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So let's take a look at some questions from the chat. So someone asked, is it helpful for a successful application for starting grant to already have publications for the project it's going to present? So this will be for Florian or for Maytal.
Maybe I can go first. Is it helpful? Yes. I think it's always helpful to have preliminary data to support your ideas. If it is a preprint or already a peer-reviewed publication, I think probably does not will have that kind of difference. But I think what is important is that you convey the message that you're the right candidate in order to execute the project that you're proposing. Whether you show this as preliminary data within your application or whether you show it as a already available publication, that will very much then depend on also what kind of reviews and what kind of panel you have, how they value it. But that's definitely an advantage. I think that's for sure.
All right. Another question, how did you propose to mitigate the risks associated with your projects? Did you use pilot data or just itemize the number of risk management strategies? Maybe Maytal can take this one.
Probably we can both say something. I would just say that I made a list, so it will be super clear what are the risks are. Like I didn't hide any risk, and sometimes I used my expertise in the subject if it's a difficult technological problem. I tried not to use too much collaborations because my feeling was that they don't really like it that you say like maybe you can say that you will have collaboration, it's fine, but it's important to make sure that you're not dependent on them. They don't like it, and and some mitigation was just based on preliminary results. So I have the foundation to make this leap of faith kind of assumption. So different.
Yeah, I agree. I also, was very, in the preparation of writing the grant, I was really listing all the risks that are associated with it, and I tried to address them one by one. I agree with the collaborations. It's actually sometimes positive to mention the collaborations, but what needs to be absolutely clear is that your project can be successful even without these collaborations. The collaborations could be a nice add-on, but for a starting grant, what is, I think, probably one of the worst things is to make it appear as you're dependent on somebody more senior, for example, to achieve what you're proposing. So in the end, there's no need. I think it's better to be open about the risks, because the reviewer will spot them either way. And if you did not mention them, they will take it as a negative. So it's better to actually list them and have an idea of how you can overcome them.
Someone else has asked, is it okay to submit a quite similar proposal to different grant agencies? So say one to your national grant agency and then to an international grant agency.
It will depend on the grant agency whether they allow this. I think some of them have regulations where they do not allow it, and others might not be as strict. I think if you apply with the same proposal to 2 different agencies and you get eventually funded by both, you will have to decline one. So it's just also more work for the reviewers to read. Maybe you have the same reviewer in both cases. There's certain things to take into consideration, but usually it's best to ask the grant agency if that is allowed.
There's a question specifically for Maytal. Did you change the topic of your proposals, or did you refine your original vision over the application rounds?
Yeah, I didn't change. So of course, with the years, I took some turns, but the subject was, the topic was basically the same, and with time it was more preliminary data and refinement.
Yeah. Maybe I can ask a question for Rebecca. In terms of, do you have any advice for choosing the right EM system for the grant? So what can you feasibly put in that 1 million additional budget that is available?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the answer that I will give might sound deliberately evasive, but every institution is really unique in terms of the wider research environment, and every project is unique in terms of what you're looking to achieve. So obviously, in terms of, for example, the TEMs, if you're working only with that €1 million extra, you're not going to be able to negotiate a Titan Cryos into that budget. However, what you may be able to do is look more widely at the research environment. Maybe there is a way to use some of that money to top up another funding application, for example, to mean that you can get a system which has slightly more capability or more tuned capability for your system. And finally, also really do consider upgrades. So if there are technical experts at your institution running the equipment, reach out to them. It may be that, for example, there are software upgrades or hardware upgrades, which might enable I guess more productive use of the system through the term of your grant. I do see that somebody's just popped in the chat also, can the $1 million extra be used for an instrument plus specialist technician? So obviously we'd always advise to reach out to your local ERC funding experts for clarification, but that €1 million is specified to be used for either capital equipment or access to facilities. So obviously facility access charges may include some staff cost, but that needs to be the costing structure on that is worked out on an institution by institution basis. So hopefully that answers that question as well.
Someone else was asking, how do you strike a balance between justifying feasibility but also having an ambitious proposal?
Yeah, I can say that I think you have to show feasibility. Like it's a grant. I thought it's a less conservative grant, but I think they do put emphasis on feasibility. And I think the ambitious part should be coming from a really novel direction, that you're not competing with the entire world on the same project in a way, and that you have your own niche. So if you come up with a specific question that you have the tools to answer better than anybody else. For example, if you are working on a specific system for several years and then you want to use new methodology, or you are an expert on a specific methodology and you have a completely new application, then this is the ambitious part. But they will not probably like something that you have no grounds to prove any feasibility.
You want to add anything, Florian?
No, I agree. I think, so it needs to be feasible, but it should not be something that is, it needs to be innovative and novel. I think I was asked regularly during during the application phase by the grant office in our institute, but also other people, how groundbreaking is it that you want to do? And it was not about, okay, how difficult is it what you want to achieve, but how different is it from what people have already done before? I think that is the stuff that you need to work on most to exemplify why your work is innovative.
So there's a good question from someone in the chat who's pointed out that both of you already had active labs at the point where you were applying. So what about postdocs who don't have labs yet? Is it any different for them, or do you have any advice for them?
I mean, there's obviously a difference when you have already, a lab that is running, because you can probably show different things that you have achieved already. But I think when it comes to the project, and that is what is probably the most important thing about the entire grant, is how innovative and how interesting is your idea. You will need to show that you are the correct applicant for this type of proposal, that you have the expertise and also, the knowledge in order to pull off what you're presenting. So in the end, that's what will matter most. I think, what it comes back to the question that we had before, when you have something to show as a preliminary data, as a publication already, that's obviously helpful, but it's not a knockout criterion, obviously.
And I think that you need a host. So you must have a host that agrees to take you in. So I don't know if some places are just saying, okay, if you get the ERC, you're in, but they have to guarantee. Otherwise, the ERC application process involves the statement from the host.
Someone else asked if you were asked about your competitors during your interview and how you dealt with that.
Yes. It's one of the questions I think that everybody gets asked. Who are your competitors and how do you stand out? And that's actually a question that I spent a lot of time thinking before my interview, how to properly answer this without making it sound overconfident, obviously, but also not making it sound that you are working in an environment where there are 20 people working on the same thing, because that would show that you're not innovative or novel. So this is actually a question that really requires some preparation. And I have not yet heard of anyone who did not get asked that question.
And I have to say that my feeling through all the application, and specifically in the interview, is that no matter what our personalities in real life, in the ERC, both in application, written application, and in the interview, you have to be super confident and much less humble than what you are in real life, unless you are really not humble. But you cannot be by any way defensive. So if they sense that you don't believe in your own research, if you have doubts that somebody can do it better than you do, if you had doubts in yourself, they will not give it to you. Why would they? If you don't believe in the project, like, why would they believe in you? So it has to be very, very clear. Also in the written application, not being defensive. I'm not saying stating wave handing, no, and not being like just arrogant prick, but definitely being super confident and I believe in my research and I'm the best person to do my research because my research is super cool and I know my system better than anybody else. So it's super important. I didn't realize how much.
Okay, maybe I'll ask one final question to Rebecca to wrap up. Do you have any advice regarding reasonably budgeting for electron microscopy within your grant to have increased chances of success?
Yeah, so in terms of budget, and I think Florian and Maytal have alluded to this throughout, thinking about it early, thinking about thinking about what resources you really need to deliver the research program is key, and then reaching out early to those who can provide information. So that might be, for example, reaching out to Thermo Fisher and making sure that you have up-to-date quotations and financial information so that you can include that early. Things might be cheaper or more expensive than you anticipate, and also reaching out to the facilities if you are going to be accessing somewhere else. They will have a charging structure in all likelihood, so getting that information early will help you be better prepared.
Great. Well, thanks to all three of you. Any questions that we didn't have time for today, we will address via the contact information you provided when you registered. As Rebecca mentioned, we have various resources available to support you, so please reach out through the website or reach out directly to us. The webinar can, of course, be viewed on demand, as I mentioned, so feel free to share with other people who couldn't join today. And through the website, you can also register for any upcoming sessions and receive email alerts for upcoming sessions. We have a feedback survey, so please let us know if you would like similar sessions like this one for other grants and which grants you would be interested in. And yeah, thank you very much to Florian and Maytal for joining us today, and Rebecca as well, of course, and all of the attendees. And that's all. Thank you very much, everyone.